I'm here. My name is Shawn Ankenmann. I'm advocating today for the book by Eden Robinson, Son of a Trickster. Hold it up so people can see it. My journey with the West Coast began in 1993. I was newly ordained in the United Church and settled in the community of Bella Coola with the Newhalkim people, one of the West Coast First Nations communities that borders on both of the communities that Eden Robinson comes from. One of the highlights I had in my time in Bella Coola was after church on Sunday evening, we would brew a pot of tea, get some goodies, and we would sit in the back of the church in the CE hall, and the elders would tell stories. They would, over tea and goodies, just talk. And one of the First Nations writers talks about Auntie's laughter. And when I heard that, it was something I could relate to in a very real and tangible way. The First Nations communities are a place with great joy and great laughter despite incredible hardships. And I remember vividly asking one of the elders one day, who was always laughing and smiling and had a life that was marked with incredible tragedy, "Why are you always so happy?" And she said, "You can do four things in life when, as you journey. You can get angry, but that's not going to help because you'll still be angry when something happens. You can cry, but that's not going to help because everyone will wander away from you. Or you can drink, and that's not going to help because that'll create more problems." And then she said, or you can get up and open your eyes in the morning and say, life is good, and fill the day with laughter and joy and smiles. And that's what Amma did. For 90 some years she lived, and she was one of the happy, joyous people despite losing children and grandchildren to incredible tragedies. Her family were survivors of residential school and abuse and all manner of things. And it's kind of set a tone. And when I approached Eden Robinson's book, it approached with that same kind of humor. The First Nations communities understand suffering. They understand generational struggles and abuse, alcohol, drugs, physical, sexual abuse, residential schools, there's colonialism. All of that stuff is part of the background story that comes to the fore in Son of a Trickster. And Eden tells the story simply of a young man named Jared and the journey that he takes. And it's set in the Northwest Coast, which is a very mystical, shadowy place. If you go for a hike on the Northwest Coast and you step off the beaten path, it doesn't take long for you to end up lost, both sort of physically and sort of metaphysically in a spiritual realm. It's a very strange place. It's full of noises. It's full of creatures and beings, both real and mythic. Eden touches on it with the trickster, with the otter people, with the bear, with witches, and with visions, that the First Nations people, they are real. They are there. That's part of the storytelling. It's part of the experience. I remember sitting with an elder and we were talking about the spirit world, and they said the spirit world is as far away as your next breath, and it's as close as the tear on your cheek. And that when someone passes from this world to the next, they're with us. They're somewhere nearby. And so that's what I would say Eden has been steeped in, is the same kind of oral tradition and storytelling that I was privileged to experience as a newly ordained minister going into a Native community. And her humor is a little sharp. It can be a little black, a little dark. But it is very much grounded in that sense of hope and joy that comes with this is a good moment because we're alive, and that life will get better, sort of like Amma, the elder in Bella Coola, shared with me many times over coffee and tea in my time in that community. And so the book, my recommendation is read the book. Read the works of First Nations writers. They speak with a voice that's familiar, but with a voice that's also different. Their life experience is not like ours. Their life experience is kind of run up against what we're comfortable with in white dominant society. And they speak with a voice that we need to hear, especially as we journey in the reconciliation process that's been part of our reality as Canadians over the last 10 to 15 years. I approach this from the perspective of having sat at table at dinner with a gentleman by the name of Willie Blackwater, who sued the United Church of Canada and the government of Canada over residential school, and the finding, Blackwater versus the United Church, began the journey that has led us to reconciliation. Willie wanted to hear two simple words, "I'm sorry," from his church for the abuse that he experienced at Alberni Residential School, and was turned down. The church said, "We can't do it." So he went to court and forced the church and the government to offer that apology. And it's that kind of experience that Eden brings without being explicit about it. It's in the background. It's part of the narrative. It's part of the background that is just there within the book. And it pops to the surface because if you understand First Nations communities, especially on the Northwest Coast, it's there. It's just simply part of their reality. And so she tells a hopeful story that at times is gritty. Yet she deals with drugs, sex, rock music, abuse, all of these things, violence, the realities of life in a First Nations community. But she also does it in a way that embodies hope. Jared is an optimistic character who's just trying to do good in the world, just trying to bring care and understanding to the people he works with or lives with. And it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes things turn. But as the book unfolds, he's realizing his connectedness to the spirit world that's all around him, the spirit world that is part of his First Nations background. And so that deep hope bubbles to the surface and kind of educates and informs everything that follows. It's also safe to say Ms. Robinson has simply set the stage for her trilogy of stories that involve the Trickster. The second one has been published. The third one is pending imminently. And they're worth reading. They're worth following the journey with Jared as he journeys through life and matures and struggles with understanding his connectedness to this spirit world that's all around him as it reveals itself to him. My other point that I would end on is Thomas King, another First Nations writer, once wrote a short story called A Good Story, that one, that consisted of two First Nations gentlemen saying to each other over and over, "Do you remember that story? Oh yeah, that was a good story, that one." And by the end of the story, you don't know what the story was, but they've affirmed over and over, it's a good story, that one. And I would say that of Eden Robinson's book. It's a good story. It's worth following and reading, but there is substance to it. Jared struggles as he comes of age as a teenager, his struggles as he comes to understand who he is and where he fits in, his struggles as he comes to understand the spirit world around him, and his connectedness to the mythic beings like Trickster and the otter people and the bear that kind of looms around him and isn't really there but is. And the visions that he has. He has some powerful visions as he moves through the world. It is a First Nation story. It is a story that's approachable. It is a story that's informative. And it's a story that's truly enlightening, that is inspiring as you read it, because it has a sense of hope that just permeates everything that it's about. So I'll begin and end on the same recommendation. Read the book. Find Son of a Trickster and take time to read it and truly enjoy the book, because Eden is a great storyteller. Her previous work has been, in my opinion, is quite good and well worth finding as well. But this book is a good entrance to her world and how she sees things as a Haisla and Hiltsuk woman, and to realize her voice is familiar, but it is different. It comes from a different place, and it speaks from a different experience, one that we do well to consider as Canadians as we journey this path of reconciliation with our First Nations people and the history that we have with them. So read the book, please. It's a great book. Vote early, vote often. Thank you.